Welcome to another episode of Menopause Reimagined. Today I'm going to be talking about healthspan and lifespan, and my guest has interviewed several experts when it comes to longevity. He puts on a longevity summit, and he asked experts as to what their tips are when it comes to living a longer, healthier quality of life. But before I introduce my guest, I'm going to do a quick introduction to who I am. My name is Andrea Donsky. I'm a nutritionist for 20 years. I'm a menopause educator and published menopause researcher. I'm also the co-founder of wearemorphus.com, a company that helps to empower you to take control of your health and symptoms with nutrition, lifestyle, supplements, and research. And talking about supplements, we have an entire line of supplements called Morphus supplements that I'd love you to check out. And these include magnesium, our Sleep Us, which is awesome. And when you take them together, they're called our cortisol calm bundle. They help you get that incredible deeper night's sleep and longer night's sleep. Today I'm speaking with Chris Burris. He's a published author, host of the Uncovering the Secrets to Longevity Health Summit, podcast host, and master of comedy improv. Chris is the founder and chief scientist at MyVitalC, where he manufactures a Nobel Prize-winning molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result in history. He's the intersection where science meets laughter, and his life's mission is to help people live longer, healthier, happier, pain-free lives with science. Now, here's Chris. Hey, Chris, welcome to Menopause Reimagined.
Andrea, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to connect with you and your audience and share some cool science.
And I know that you are a longevity expert and you spent a lot of time researching longevity. You have a longevity summit. And, for us, especially as we go into perimenopause and menopause, I mean, longevity obviously is something that most of us, I would think, strive for, but it's health span. That's really, we want to live a long life, but we want to live it healthily. We want to make sure that we can move. We have a good quality of life. Talk about some of the things that you have learned in your career and, in your journey that has really helped with extending lifespan and
Well,
health span.
at some point, I'd love to kind of share the story of how I ended up here, because I honestly, 8 years ago, I would have never thought that I would be here. If you had said, hey, you're going to be in the longevity space, you're going to have interviewed 55 experts in longevity. It's going to include people like Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Dr. Stephen Gundry, Sergey Young, Tom O'Brien, like that I would have said, no, that's probably not going to happen, because I don't really see the path from here to there. But I love to give really interesting tidbits. One of the things that I did in the Longevity Summit, again, I interviewed 55 experts in longevity, is I asked each and every one of them, what are 2 to 3 habits, mindsets, protocols, let's call them shortcuts. Everybody likes shortcuts for longevity and a long health span that they would share. And then we aggregated that data, and some interesting things and even interesting thought processes came out of that. 33.3%, so exactly 1/3 of the experts mentioned sleep, 52% mentioned exercise, 52% mentioned diet, and 46% mentioned mindset. And actually, it was 46% mindset, 33.3% sleep. And my first thought was, and you know this, how important is sleep, especially in perimenopause? Like, sleep is trashed often.
Oh, yeah. Sleep is one of the fundamentals of being in this phase of life, for sure. But that's
Yeah.
interesting. So mindset, more of them said mindset than they said sleep.
Now, yes, and my first thought process was like, sleep is so important for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. How is it that I think they had it wrong? And then it took me a couple days. You got to mold these things over, and then I was like, wait a minute, right? And you know this with all the people you're kind of influencing, having impact on. If they don't have the mindset to change how they sleep,
Yes.
they're not going to change it. If they don't have the mindset to change how they exercise or move, whatever level they're at, it's not going to change. If they need to cut wheat out of their diet, which is what a lot of people need to do, right? Like, that's a thing that needs to be happening typically. If they don't have the mindset to do it, then they're not going to do it. So in some sense, I think they got it wrong, but mindset's even more important than you really realize. So yeah, you got to fix sleep, you got to fix exercise, you got to fix your diet. But if you don't have the mindset to fix those, then it's never going to happen. That was one of the interesting things that came out of it.
That is interesting. It's funny. I was literally just having this conversation with my daughter yesterday about mindset, because she's a basketball player. She plays high-level basketball. She's going to be 14. And we were talking about mindset for the kids on the team. And even one of the if one of the kids, if their mindset is off during the game, it really impacts the rest of the team, especially when there's three captains on our team. She's one of the captains. And we talk about that a lot. And I'm their mindset coach. I'm an assistant coach on the team, but part of my responsibility is mindset. So I actually agree with that. And it's so true. And listen, I've been in the health and wellness space now for 25 years. And the amount of people that I've spoken to, I mean, in menopause now for, I think it's like 8 years, 7, 8 years. But before then, I was in the health and wellness space in terms of helping people look at what they're eating and how they're living their life and choices that they're making. And you're absolutely right that being in that right mindset really makes a difference as to whether or not you want to make the changes that are sometimes necessary for you to get to that next phase of your life, right? Or to that next step.
Yeah, 100%. So like I said, in some sense they got it wrong, but not how I initially thought. That mindset is so very important.
So what are some of the other things that they shared? And by the way, I love all the stats. Like you're like, as you're spewing them out, I'm like, you sound like me. I'm like, oh, like because I'm a total data person. So I love the fact that you're even spewing those statistics.
Yeah, no, I love stats. Yeah, I'm driven by stats. I'm the guy who like, hey, we've got some marketing going on and I want to look at the numbers. And then like 4 hours later, I'm like, okay, I've glanced at the numbers.
Exactly. Yeah, you sound like me.
Um, I think another big thing that came out of it, I really went into the longevity summit with a mindset and by the way, I went into the longevity summit coming off of having written my book, Live Longer and Better, right? And where I was digging further and deeper into longevity. And I went into it kind of looking for what I call two silver bullets, right? One is the silver bullet of health, the bullet that you could swallow and then we were all healthy and it's all
Yeah.
magical and that, right? So look for that. Maybe you've been looking for that a lot longer than I have. And probably came to the same conclusion. The other, and we'll talk about that in a second. The other silver bullet was when you're thinking about longevity, is there this silver bullet that will actually kill you, right? Like, is there something that we as a medical community don't really have a handle on? And that is the thing that's actually going to ultimately take us out, right? From a health perspective, from a natural causes perspective. Well, it will not surprise you that I did not find the silver bullet that you could
Mm.
swallow and you can live a lot longer and a lot healthier. That just doesn't exist. It takes effort. It takes a mindset change to actually implement that effort. But from the silver bullet of something that will actually take you out, right? And I'm coming to this from a place of David Sinclair's book Lifespan. And I don't know if you've read that, anybody in your audience has read it. He really wrote this book. So he's a Harvard researcher, a medical researcher, and really believes in this thing called the information theory of aging, which is that we have all the information we need in our bodies to be a younger us. And his evidence, and I certainly believe in this, is you can take a cell, any cell off of your body, and you can make a baby you, right? You can clone that cell, and it starts off as a baby. It doesn't start as a mature woman, right? So everything that you need inside of you, all that information is there. But that information starts getting garbled, and we need to fix it. And one of the challenges with trying to fix it in our current environment is that the medical community does not believe that aging is a disease, and therefore you can't get any funding for aging. Now,
Mm.
what they're doing is they're looking at Alzheimer's, they're looking at cardiovascular disease, they're looking at arthritis, all these diseases of aging. But the biggest indication for any one of those diseases is age. And if you could take that funding and throw it at age, you would actually fix all of those things all at once. A lot of people think if we're going to solve cancer, then we're going to live a lot longer. Well, it turns out you're probably going to live about 4 to 5 years longer because the next disease of aging is going to step in and do its job, right? So it's either cardiovascular disease or it's Alzheimer's. Like there's always something that's next. Diabetes, there's something that's next. So he's advocating for addressing aging, convincing the medical community that if we started addressing aging, we're actually going to start addressing all of these diseases. And so that was kind of the foundation of why I went into it. We're looking at what is this silver bullet that will actually take you out. And the thing that came up really in two interviews, I interviewed two people about stem cells, right? Stem cells, unbelievably important for our health. They are the repair cells. Everyone knows we slough off skin regularly and it's replaced. Our muscles are replenished every 3 months, about every 3 months. Those are replaced. Sometimes you don't think, oh, they're just replaced. Like there's new muscle cells. Well, where do those new muscle cells come from? They come from stem cells that are released from your red bone marrow, and that get programmed to become muscle cells when they're in that area, and your body's like, hey, we need the scaffolding in order to rebuild this muscle. Red blood cells, there's a company called Stem Regen. Got to interview the CEO, Christian Drapeau, and he has a formula that helps your body to release stem cells from your red bone marrow, which sounds great, but one of the concerns is like, am I releasing a lot and now I'm not going to have any left over, right? I also had a great interview with Dr. Joy Kong. She's a stem cell scientist in California. And what really honed in for me is at some point, your red bone marrow starts shrinking and produces less and less stem cells. If you don't have any more stem cells, then your lifespan is going to be cut short, right? And I actually reached back out via email, like, do we have any technologies right now to replenish stem cells? The answer is, red bone marrow. The answer is no, but there is the potential, and this is kind of me kind of thinking outside the box. Well, maybe we know we can pull stem cells and we can grow them outside of our body. Maybe as we kind of solve a lot of other problems and the stem cell problem becomes the last thing we got to fix, we can actually just do kind of like a dialysis situation where you're going in and getting stem cell injections of your own or whatever that might look like in the future. And so those were the two silver bullets. There's nothing you can swallow to just be healthy, and this is something that is going to have to be solved.
It reminds me, as you're speaking, I was thinking about that guy that he's spending like $2 million a year. What's his name?
Brian Johnson. Yeah.
Brian Johnson. Thank you. That he's
He's got
spending
a
all this
Netflix
money.
special right now. Like it's on, literally, I watched it the other day. It was pretty good. He's an interesting character for sure. Yeah, we were debating it at my whole family is in town, and we got together last night, and we were talking about it.
Did any of the things that he's doing kind of come up from the experts that you interviewed at the Longevity Summit?
Yeah, he's doing, a lot of it is diet. A lot of it is sleep. I think he's extremely regimented about sleep, and then diet, and he's taken 62 pills first thing, whatever the number is, first thing in the morning, and then another 45 in the afternoon, which is all diet and nutrition, right? So it is the key factors. He wears a red light cap for hair. Like he's doing all of the things that we're kind of aware of. You go to a biohacking conference, he's doing all the things that have kind of legitimate science behind them. And I think kind of towards the end, I didn't understand exactly what he was doing, but he did some genetic modification thing that is like highly new, like it's a new kind of research area, and it may not even be, certainly it's not been approved by the FDA for even human trials, but he said, he described it as he is and his team were the most comfortable with this, and that apparently it has some sort of, they can turn it off, right? So if it starts going awry, then they can turn it off.
Right.
But that's the most cutting edge thing that I think he was doing.
See, and it comes down to sleep again, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where my research has taken me in terms of really understanding, we know that according to my research that was just published, that sleep is the third most common symptom of perimenopause and menopause. So it's something that we definitely have issues with. This is why I launched our Sleep Bus and our magnesium to help women sleep in this phase of life. But when it comes to really making sure that you make sleep a priority, I cannot stress it enough. Like it is so important. Now, there are things and factors that wake us up, like stress and night sweats and going to the bathroom several times a night. So there are things that we know that are interfering with our sleep, but having the mindset of making it a priority is really tough. And believe me, I me included, like there are some, especially over the last several years, now I make it a priority, and I instill that in my kids as well. And I'm like, okay, you have to, going to bed at 3 a.m. is not good for you. Like, my kids are teenagers, right? And my son's in his early 20s, but like, it's one of those things that I'm trying to share with my kids, because when you have these habits, especially when you're young, they're going to stick with you throughout your life. So I think it's interesting to see, again, that sleep. It comes up all the time. So it's interesting to see that Brian Johnson is kind of emphasizing that, as well as did the people that you interviewed.
How about have you read Dr. Matthew Walker's book Why We Sleep?
I have not yet.
Okay, so just a little funny note, right? Dr. David Sinclair's book is Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to.
Yeah.
Dr. Matthew Walker's book is Why We Sleep. Unfortunately, it does not say and why we don't have to, because we have to. It is the scariest book
Yeah.
about sleep that you will ever read. And I call it, this is good for our generation, I call it the Freddy Krueger of sleep books, right? Whereas Freddy Krueger, the evil character from Nightmare on Elm Street, would scare you out of your dreams. This book, Why We Sleep, will scare you into your dreams. He literally, in his opening dialogue, talks about, if you happen to fall asleep while reading this, I will consider it a privilege and be very complimented by it. It's terrifying. And just, one of the stats from that, we do a 2 billion person experiment, maybe even more, twice a year on sleep. And part of you is like, wait, I'm no data, 2 billion people. How do you even manage this particular study? It's called daylight savings time, where we strip 1 hour of sleep from everybody who participates, and then we add it. And the data, you probably know this, it's in the 23 to 20, I think 21 to 23. When we lose that hour of sleep, heart attacks go up by something like 21 to 23%. And then when we gain that hour of sleep back, they go down by 21 to 23%. They're not exactly the same. I don't know exactly how that works. But this, I mean, lack of sleep or missing sleep has an absolute physiological impact on your body, and it's to be avoided. We, by the way, are the only creatures on the planet that will forego sleep for no valuable cause, right? You're either, the only reasons you should, any other wildlife animal would ever forego sleep is because there's danger, food potentially, or mate. We're not even doing, well, maybe some of staying up late is number 3. but we're like, it's not that valuable for us to be missing sleep. So, yeah, sleep is so important. And I couldn't recommend that book more.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned to me, I think you mentioned the book when I was on your podcast. I think you had asked me that as well. I know I definitely want, and I I'm like trying to find the words, because like, as much as I love the idea of that, read a book because it's going to scare us into sleep. The truth is, I know the importance of sleep, and I really try to share that with my audience. And it's so, especially now, it's so crucial because it plays a role on so many parts of our body, especially when it comes to like weight gain or weight loss or weight management, insulin resistance. Like, we're talking, like, which can lead to type 2 diabetes, which we're more prone to, right? So all of these play in a massive role. Brain health. Like, so it is definitely an important thing. And if you want to, ladies, if you want to read it, we'll put a link below to the book. If you want to get scared into sleeping more so than we already talk about here on the podcast, and we'll put a link to it below so that you could read more on it.
And you mentioned brain health. That's the way he got into studying sleep was initially researching Alzheimer's. And one thing that just kept cropping up was poor sleep in Alzheimer's patients. And then he just, spent 25 years. He was, I think he's out of University of California, one of the University of California branches, and was at one point, it was Harvard or Yale. Like, he's an illustrious, and by the way, an amazing. You go watch a video. There's no ums. There's no ahs.
The way he speaks. Oh, that's great.
He's an unbelievable speaker.
That's incredible. And that is why, Chris, like when we launched our Morphus products, and I formulated a product called Sleep Us, that is why I formulated Sleep Us, because it helps us get that better night's sleep. And when you take it with our mag, like, it is a game changer. Like, I actually get anxious when I'm running low. Like, that's why I'm like, okay, if I don't have Sleep Us in mag, I'm like, our magnesium, I'm like, I'm getting anxious, because I know, and I have like trackers, right? I wear wearables to tell me what my sleep is like, especially my deep sleep. So I'm like, I like to say, and I'm a menopause sleep hacker, because for me, it is crucial. So I love that it's even coming up in the conversation today, but it would, right? Because it is one of the crucial foundations for making sure that we can extend extend our longevity, it has an impact on longevity, but also our health span. So, Chris, you mentioned in the beginning that you wanted to talk about your story. So, share it. I'd love to hear how you came to how you came to this space in the first place.
Yeah, so I have a very unique story. A lot of people it's very often a pain to passion story to end up in the health space, right?
Yeah.
Where they solved a problem of their own that they were having, or maybe a loved one, and they found the right protocols. They did all sorts of things, and that shoved them down all sorts of kind of paths of getting certificates and then having this passion to heal people. I am not that. I certainly believe in healing people. It's just not how I ended up here at all. I actually started manufacturing. So I'm holding up a molecule. If you're a model of a molecule, if you're not watching a screen, just imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. The molecule was discovered in 1985 here in Houston at Rice University. And the three scientists who discovered the molecule actually won the Nobel Prize for that discovery in 1996. So a short 11 years from discovery to being awarded the Nobel Prize. My company and my business partner and I started manufacturing this in 1991, a full 5 years before the Nobel Prize was granted. This molecule is amazing, right? And we've been selling it and still to today sell it to research institutions around the world. And what it does is it makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And this is often where people are like, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about your journey into health. Never have I thought about inks, batteries, tires, and photocells being associated with health. And the story actually kind of gets a little bit worse. One of the shapes on the exterior of the soccer ball shaped molecule, we call it ESS60, one of those shapes is reminiscent of benzene. It's the same shape of benzene. Benzene is really important for our society. We don't have modern society without benzene. If you just look around you, anything that is plastic has benzene as a foundational molecule. Many medicines have benzene, aspirin included, many detergents. So we just don't have modern society without benzene. So it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. But when it's on its own, it's a known toxin and a known carcinogen. So because that shape is on the exterior of this ESS60 molecule, they thought it would be toxic. They put it in a toxicity study. And instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave it to, in this case it was Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. Turns out that's the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, and that's peer-reviewed published research. And I'm very proud to share that my lab provided the material, and my lab is mentioned in that original study.
Amazing.
Now, the story, that maybe seems obvious that we would immediately get into the health space. Certainly was the study that shifted our trajectory. My business partner, or I like to call ourselves happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientists. If there is such a thing, we are them. But that did change our trajectory. But it took us a while. That study came out in mid-2012. In mid-2013, we started getting phone calls from this crazy, wacky group called biohackers, and I can call them crazy and wacky because I'm now a biohacker. And
I
they
knew
were,
you were being like,
yeah. And so they're calling us and they're saying, hey, how much of this stuff should I take? And you got to think of us super conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. And what we hear when they were asking this question was, wait a minute, how much of this stuff that we sell to research institutions around the world to put in ink, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much of that should you take? We went with 0, and we actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid-2013. So you think about it, we started manufacturing in 1991, never had to say not for human consumption all the way to 2013. And we were getting phone calls, like 2 to 3 phone calls a week of people saying, hey, my knee pain's gone. And we were like, wait a minute, you mean the knee pain of your rat, right? Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And they're
and
like,
people were taking
yeah.
it internally. Okay.
And they're like, yeah. What if my rat weighed 270 pounds and trained for triathlons? How much should that rat, right? So that was from 2013 really until 2017. My business partner and I were getting together really on a quarterly basis and going, are we going to get into the health business? Like, this is clearly, we're still getting these phone calls 2 to 3 a week. And our conclusion was we just didn't, there's such a huge difference between selling carbon nanomaterials to research institutions to getting into the supplement space. You're in the space, like you've got
Yep.
competitors like, I don't know if you're even have anything in your product.
Which is why I wanted to get into the supplement space, because it's Wild West out there, right? So we want to make sure you've got the quality, and these are supplements that you would want to take. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and you end up being your own litmus test, right? Where you're like, one, I've researched the ingredients, I'm comfortable with the ingredients, and I take it and I feel my own the impact that it's having on your own health, and
Yeah.
then you're like, okay, this is something that I probably should share. Like that is the driver. And ours again was a little different. These people are calling us 2 to 3 times a week. I actually found a peer-reviewed published research paper that said 50% of the supplements that this research team had purchased off the market didn't have in them what they said they had in
Oh,
them, right?
it's just,
And I know that's not surprising to you, but it might be
yeah.
surprising to some of your audience, right? Because wait a minute, 50% don't have in them what they say they have in them. And so we just kept saying every quarter we'd kind of review it. No, we're not interested. And finally, at the end of 2017, a guy with a big following started talking about all the benefits he was getting, taking it on a daily basis. Our phone went from 2 to 3 calls a week to 10 calls a day. And we sat down and we thought two things, right? We thought two things to ourselves. One is this is a bigger entrepreneurial opportunity than we imagined. And then
Mhm.
two, if you look back at that paper, 50% of the supplements on the market don't have in them what they say they have in them. Somebody's going to step into the space, right? This
Mhm.
void that clearly
Right.
exists, and they're going to deliver like inferior products and potentially dangerous products. Like we just wanted to
Right.
help mitigate that. And there were two questions that finally got us over the hump. And they were, first, the moral question. Are we comfortable selling this? I take it, my wife takes it, everybody on our team here takes it. By the way, it's not a requirement to work on our team. You do not have to take our product. They just hear the testimonials, they see the research, and they do take it. And then the other one is the legal, and you're probably very familiar with this, having a supplement on the market. You've got the FTC and the FDA. You've got to cross the T's, you've got to dot the I's. And that's
Absolutely.
when, in about 2018, we really initially brought this product to market.
So you say that, you're taking it, your wife taking it. When did you go from, like, manufacturing it to, being like, oh, maybe I should try this and take it internally?
So I'll tell you, even way back in 2012 when that paper came out, right? So all sorts of interesting things were happening. We're the largest and oldest manufacturer of this molecule on the planet, right? Nobody's been manufacturing the molecule longer than us.
Mm.
And we provided it in that initial paper, right? So you can
Right.
imagine anybody who was like, hey, I could turn this into the business. Who did they call? They called us. And so we started selling a lot of the carbon powder and kind of came to realize that they were putting it in oil and they were selling it. Like we still had not for human consumption on our labeling, but they were just going full force.
Okay.
And actually one of the initial companies we ended up buying, so it's actually in our kind of umbrella of companies.
Right.
In mid 2012, I took a bottle. Like I think I went on a vacation. I took a bottle with me, and I'll be honest, I didn't really notice much, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll sell it. And when the phone started going 10 times a week and I'm starting to feel it, by the way, our most consistent testimonial is people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. And that's a really broad thing. Like people don't typically think, oh, this thing gives me focus and energy and better sleep. Like that's unusual, and we believe that the mechanism is unusual, and so that's why that's happening. But when we started getting these 10 calls and we're getting testimonials literally from head to toe, that's when I'm like, okay, I'm going to start taking this on a regular basis. And in the early days, it wasn't like integrated into my kind of coffee routine. That's where it is right now. And so I could get to the middle of the day and I might start yawning. I might start thinking I needed a nap. And then I could always look back and realize I hadn't taken my MyVital-C that morning. And then now it's in my coffee routine. So I put a little bit of MCT in my coffee, kind of like a bulletproof coffee thing. And then I take a teaspoon and a half of our olive oil product as part of my breakfast routine.
And are there any side effects? Like you were saying, you didn't really feel anything, but are there any side effects reported?
So if you want to talk about side effects, I mean, the short answer is no. The kind of longer, more detailed answer is we use a high quality extra virgin olive oil.
Which I
And so
like that
that
you're
will,
not using a seed oil and that you're actually using olive oil. Thank you for that.
yeah. Yeah, and that'll leave a peppery flavor at the back of your throat. So we get a call, I don't know, every now and then, once a year or something. Oh, is it rancid because it's burning my throat? No,
No,
that's
it's
actually a
supposed
hot.
to. Real olive oil is actually supposed. I did a TV segment years ago, and I worked with a high quality olive oil company, and they said to me, if your olive oil is not burning the back of your throat, it's not a high quality olive oil. That I learned that so long ago. That's interesting.
Yeah, and you maybe have been to a restaurant where they'll put olive oil on a plate for bread to drip, and then they'll crack pepper in it. And
Mm.
what they're trying to do is make that olive oil taste expensive because it leaves a peppery flavor at the
Yeah.
back of your throat.
Like it's not supposed to burn you, but it's supposed to have exactly like that little bit of like, yeah, that kind of
Yeah.
like.
And so some people will say that. And then the other, if you're not used to taking oil, by the way, olive oil is amazing olive oil. There's so many. Brian Johnson has an olive oil out there. Dr. Stephen Gundry has an olive oil out there. I love kind of the message that Gundry gives, which is when he says the purpose of food is to get more olive oil into your mouth. Like that's how heavily he leans on olive oil.
All the
So
monounsaturated fats.
that's really good for you. But if you're not used to taking a teaspoon, that's the typical recommended serving. You'll get some loose stool for a day or two, right? And it's not diarrhea. It's just a little bit of loose stool because your body's not
Your
used to it.
body's and then it's your body's adjusting. So you want to take it with food. Is that an important thing? So
It
or is
doesn't
it or it's
really matter.
already in the fat so that it helps with the absorption.
Exactly. I mean, in reality, olive oil is a food. You can take it with food. You can take it without.
Yeah.
People do ask, "Hey, could I put it on a salad or whatever?" And the answer is yes. Except it's not inexpensive, right? It's a high in terms of like it would be the most expensive olive oil that you would purchase. So lick the plate.
You
Like,
don't want to be putting, yeah, like you don't want exactly, you don't want to be putting it on the thing. No, that's super interesting. And I find what I find fascinating is that you were able to kind of take something that you were manufacturing for a long time and then find a human like a use for it when it comes to human consumption. So how did you go though from, I guess from a legal standpoint to be able to, manufacture this for, like you were saying, batteries to now being able to take it internally? Because I know there's, it's not so easy to do. You probably had to like, was there research you had to do around it? Like, how did you do that, make that jump or that leap?
yeah, and we're continuing to do research. We actually published now it's probably 6 months ago with the lead researcher from that initial paper. So it's
Right.
Dr. Fathi Musa out of the University of Paris in that initial paper where the rats live 90% longer. By the way, we can talk a little bit about olive oil real quick. In that study, they gave one group of rats water, one group of rats olive oil, and one group of rats olive oil with the ESS60 molecule. The group of rats that they gave olive oil to lived 30% longer than the control group. Right. So again,
Right.
olive
That's great.
oil is good and you
So
should be
important.
consuming it. So fundamentally, the thing that makes the saving grace for this, right? Because it was discovered in 85, and we currently manufacture it in a reactor. The reality is you have been exposed to the ESS60 molecule. If you take the soot from a candle flame, and you normally do that by taking a cold steel plate and holding it over a candle, you'll get that super black soot, right?
Yep. Yep.
That black soot, that candle soot, has parts per million or parts per billion of the ESS60 molecule in it. So literally everyone on the planet has been exposed to this molecule. It's found abundantly in space. In fact, that's the reason it was discovered, and that's covered in my book, Live Longer and Better. The kind of whole discovery is that there was a astrophysicist in the UK who was looking at a spectrum in space and theorized that it was carbon. And then there was a particular piece of equipment at Rice University that could do magic, we'll call like do scientific magic, and ultimately was the reason they discovered the molecule. So it's a naturally occurring molecule. There's tons of it in space. The KT boundary, that's the layer of Earth associated when the asteroid hit the Earth. It has an we'll say abundance. It's still really low. Like it's not something that you could mine and then use as a supplement, but it has a significantly higher amount of the ESS60 molecule than than standard tertiary layers. So that's what throws it into the mineral category, and that's where we land.
So just to review, so you're talking about, like before you mentioned benzene, now you're mentioning soot. I just want to understand because it kind of sounds to me, I'm like, wait a second, and we're taking this internally. So explain to me kind of, how it all comes together.
Yeah. Well, So, and I think you're asking her like one, I'll talk about carbon a little bit, and then we can talk about like how this might be working. Like what, the
Right.
next thing is what's the mechanism of action? How did these rats live 90% longer?
Right, right.
So, carbon, right? Activated charcoal, good for you. There's lots of
Yeah.
forms of
Love
carbon
that.
that are good for you. Obviously carbon diamonds, beautiful. And they have a lot of uses all around. Actually, I had somebody once interview me and say, why aren't we talking about taking nano diamonds? And it was like, well, because there's no studies on them, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's some sort of benefits in there if you have a smaller quantity. So carbon is it is a good thing. And I know there's some talk about I'm trying to think it's I'm trying to remember. So there's graphene oxide, right? People are talking about graphene oxide, totally different than this molecule. Let's just get that out of the way. And graphene is showing to have so many benefits, both industrial and actually potential health benefits. So carbon fundamentally, like we're carbon beings. One person that I used to work with described this, soccer ball shaped ESS60 molecule as the perfect carbon molecule because it really is the first closed case molecule. It's pretty amazing. So one of my jobs, going into 2018, we're going to bring this supplement to market. What is the mechanism of action? And this is kind of what threw me into the longevity space. Is a 90% extension of life even a big deal? It turns out it is, right? It's the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals ever. And our first theory, I told you most consistent testimonials, people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. If you improve sleep, we've already touched on this, you're going to
Mhm,
improve your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So if
mhm.
that's all we do, then that could explain a whole lot of things. The next thing that I tried to address kind of from what's the method of action is when you talk to the medical community, they often think about aging as oxidation and inflammation. So from an oxidation
Inflammaging.
perspective, yeah, inflammaging.
Inflammaging, right? That's what
Yeah,
the term is.
exactly. So if you think about the antioxidant behavior, there's an ad hoc study out on the web that shows the product to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. And then there's peer-reviewed published research that shows it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. And I'm going to come back to antioxidant because we've got kind of a deeper theory. When talking about inflammation, I kind of already spoke like inflammation. The FDA says inflammation, chronic inflammation, is the same as the diseases of aging. So I can't talk about inflammation because that means arthritis disease,
Yeah,
cardiovascular disease.
exactly.
Also, they mean the same thing, and I think people could debate it. I think actually they're making the right decision there. What I can say is that we address inflammation related to exercise, right? So we've all had a tough workout or maybe just walked farther one day than normal and woke up and felt that inflammation in our body. The product actually addresses that type of inflammation.
Interesting. Well, for many of us now, inflammation, I mean, we're more prone to inflammation as we go into perimenopause and menopause. So that's a huge thing. So can people take it at any age though? Like for athletes or anybody who's exerting themselves in a way that is, yeah, your
Yeah,
Chris is,
no,
for those of you who
that's
are
a great
listening,
question.
he's nodding. So I'm like, okay, yeah. So yeah, I want to understand it. Like who can be taking this?
Yeah, so the last thing I'll say about inflammation, and then I'll talk about we've got a two-time ultra running champion who loves our product, and I'll talk about what he's doing. Um, we fit perfectly in an anti-inflammatory diet, right? Like that diet associated with the blue zone people, they tend to have reduced incidences of stroke, reduced incidences of heart attack, and tend to live longer. So we fit there. Anthony Kunkel loves our product. He's a two-time U.S. ultra running champion. He won a championship at 50 miles and at 100K, which is 62 miles. And my first conversation with him was fascinating because he reached out to us, right? He's a classic starving athlete, right? He's just getting by, and wakes up and trains every day, and that's all he does, and he's amazing. Um, and he shared with me that the first time he tried the product, he was only taking one serving, which is typically 1 teaspoon or 5 mils, and that he didn't notice anything. And then when he tripled, this is how he described it. When he tripled the servings, he was like, wow, this could be the difference between somebody having a running hobby and a running career. That's what a dramatic impact it's
Made a
made
huge
on
difference.
his running.
Wow.
Um, and so he describes it as he doesn't believe that it speeds exercise recovery. He believes it reduces the damage in the first place. And I'll talk about why I think that's happening. And he says that because on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run, which is a phrase you don't hear very often, where strength and stability were previously a problem, they're just not a problem. And so he really is a great advocate. He actually goes to trade shows with us, and
Oh,
is
great.
well
That's
connected.
good.
He was on
Good
Ben
spokesperson
Greenfield.
for you.
Yeah, yeah. And he was on Ben Greenfield's show. That was a fascinating interview because they're both kind of elite endurance athletes kind of jamming out about that stuff.
Great.
So absolutely. Now, what do we think is happening here? Right. So great inflammation. Let's go back to the oxidation. Our current theory is, we call it the BOSS theory, buffering oxidative stress system, right? So we know from peer-reviewed published research that this ESS60 molecule gets into the mitochondria.
Okay.
And then we also know from way back in the 90s when it was discovered that it can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of this cage. So mitochondria, I'm sure your audience knows, quick refresher, and I'll put my spin on it. It's the powerhouse of every cell, but like every powerhouse, it's got negative components. Your car going down the road has exhaust. Your power plant has a smokestack with smoke coming out of it. Your mitochondria have reactive oxygen species. These are things, I think of them like little bumper cars running around. Everything they bump into, they rust or they oxidize, they cause damage. Inside the mitochondria, you've got 2 key antioxidants to manage those reactive oxygen species, which are glutathione and melatonin. By the way, melatonin, interesting, the sleep hormone, right? And we're talking
My
about
favorite. It's
our
like my
sleep
favorite. That's
testimony.
in Sleep Us. Our melatonin, like it's an absolute, for me, I believe it's an absolute must for women in menopause. But yeah, I'm a huge, huge fan of melatonin.
Yeah, I think melatonin is a very powerful, and it's like just straight up a
It's a
hormone.
hormone.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of
It's
people don't think
amazing.
of it, that realize it, and antioxidant, right? So
And I love
multi-purpose.
glutathione too, by the way. Like
Yes.
both. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the a master
Master
antioxidant.
antioxidant. Yeah.
Yeah. So inside the mitochondria, as it's producing these reactive oxygen species, glutathione and melatonin manage those reactive oxygen species. But we know like different parts of our body can get overwhelmed, overstressed, including mitochondria, and then they start spitting out more reactive oxygen species. You can imagine Anthony Kunkel as he's running the last 5 miles
Oh
of his
yeah, for
50-mile
sure.
run.
Yeah.
He's stressing out these mitochondria.
ROS. Yeah.
That's when it overwhelms the glutathione and overwhelms the melatonin, and that's when these reactive oxygen species run around like little bumper cars and do damage. We know this gets into the mitochondria. The ESS60 is in the mitochondria from peer-reviewed published research. We believe it holds on to those reactive oxygen species
So it
so they
doesn't
don't
allow it
run
to
around and
circulate.
do damage. And then,
Interesting.
so I have this kind of fun analogy. It's Mardi Gras, the end of Mardi Gras. Oh, you have a question?
I was gonna say, but don't they have to go somewhere? And like they're keeping it in the cell?
Yeah. So we believe it's holding it in the cell. And when that mitochondria can replenish the glutathione or melatonin, then they can actually manage those reactive oxygen species appropriately. So it's a buffer, it's a holder. It's not actually doing a 1-to-1 reaction or a 6-to-1 reaction that depletes the ESS60 molecule. So maybe this example will fit. So it's Mardi Gras. You're on Bourbon Street. You got the drunk reactive oxygen species running around smashing cars and windows and whatever. And the New Orleans police are the glutathione and the melatonin who come in and handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. But when the New Orleans Police Department is overwhelmed, what do? They throw these reactive oxygen species into a paddy wagon, onto a paddy wagon. So then when they can replenish the glutathione and melatonin, then they can come in and handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. And that's why we say this ESS60 molecule is the boss.
Interesting. And so, I mean, it sounds very interesting for sure. And again, if it's going to help with longevity, I think that, that is awesome. Are there any human studies on it? Like that because you said there's so much research. So are there human studies showing that longevity as well as because I know you said the rats.
Yeah, so it's absolutely in the rats. There is a long way. There probably won't be a human longevity study. There'll be kind of anecdotal data. There'll be, aggregation of data of people who are actually taking the product versus people who are not. And the main reason is if the average person lives 90% longer, the average person will live to 152.
Hmm.
And like everybody's brain immediately goes, oh, the oldest person will be 152. No, the average. So that would be a bell curve around 152. So that kind of research isn't going to happen that way. We're currently working, we have a lot of things. So we've done super small survey trials, right? One of them is on sleep. And what we did for that particular study, we only have 10 people through it. We're working on getting more people through it, but we collected survey data for 10 days prior to them taking the product ever. So they've never taken the product. We collected that same survey data 10 days on, 10 days off, and then 10 days back on. The survey questions were like, how good was your sleep? How restless was your sleep? How quickly did you fall asleep? And how did you feel in the morning? 100% of the participations, man, that's
Participants?
funny. Yeah, participations was interesting. 100% of the participants reported improvements when they were on the product, right?
Were they wearing wearables? Because you can totally, ask them based on what the data says on their wearables, especially
That's
for
a
sleep.
That's a great question. The reason I started that study, one, we had all these testimonials about sleep, and two, through I was on a podcast pre-pandemic, and somebody put me in contact with a guy by the name of Benjamin Smar. He is a University of California, San Diego associate professor, I think. I think that's the right title. I know he's there. And he was also a consultant for Oura Ring. So it was great to start this relationship with him. The problem was at the height of COVID, the Oura Ring was pretty good at detecting COVID. If you had a good
Oh.
baseline, so if you had the device for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, it could notice the temperature rise and could tell you that something is wrong. So that was actually the genesis. We just haven't been able to put that piece back together.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
that would be a
actually,
good thing for you. I think because nowadays a lot of people have wearables and they could tell you, like I know for myself that when we track, our products, it's like how much deep sleep are you getting? How much REM sleep you getting? How much total sleep you're getting? So I think that would be a great thing, a great idea for you to do in terms of your research because you can get some really good data from people.
yeah, and that's on the list. We have
Okay.
there's that's absolutely on the list. The next thing, and this was pretty exciting. This just happened. We were at A4M Longevity Fest, which was in Vegas. I don't
In
know, maybe a month.
December, I know I'm so bummed that I missed it. So many of my friends were there, colleagues. I want to go next year. That's like on my
Yeah,
list.
it was apparently so this was the first one that we went to. We had a booth there. It was very cool. We had a lot of like cool people hanging out at our booth. In fact, Ben Greenfield, because Anthony was there, Ben Greenfield ended up hanging out at our booth for quite some time. It was like that's just super cool. But yeah, apparently other people who had booths in the past said it was even better. So that was amazing. So I had a guy approach me apparently, because I didn't remember him, but we met at the biohacking conference, Dave Asprey's biohacking conference in Dallas, and he started giving it to his patients. And I actually have a video recording of this. He shared with this. He says, Chris, I don't care if they're male, female. I don't care if they're pre-surgery, post-surgery, diabetic, cancer. I don't care. Your product will drop their C-reactive protein appreciably.
Huge. That's
And he
amazing.
gave the example that he had one client who was hovering at a 9. I really don't have a, I need to, I need, I'll be an expert in 6 months, I would guess, because I need to do a lot more research and dig into what do these numbers mean.
Yeah, what they
Uh,
mean.
but 9 is pretty high. And somebody kind of intimated to me that at 10, people just assume you have cancer until they prove otherwise, right? And C-reactive protein
Mm.
is a marker of inflammation. So if you
Yep.
have a high C-reactive protein, your
Yep.
body is inflamed. It is often
And
fighting
homocysteine.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Homocysteine.
he
Yeah.
had this client who was hovering at 9. They really couldn't move the needle. 4 to 6 weeks after starting our product, dropped it to zero point 0.9. And
That's
so
amazing. So
that's
you
the
want it to
next.
be under one. At
Yeah,
least in certain, like I don't know if it changes from country to country, but yeah, wow, that's a massive difference.
massive difference. And his confidence level on every person that takes it is amazing. So C-reactive protein tests are inexpensive. I actually had my director of research going to dive
The
into it.
blood test, yeah, easy blood test. Well, you can blood test, you can ask your doctor to give you.
Yeah. And so our current plan is we're going to do a study with that. right? So, hey, if you've never taken the product, let's get your C-reactive protein, and then
Totally should do
four,
that.
6 weeks in, let's see what it looks like.
Okay,
So yeah,
amazing.
we have those things going on
Okay,
top
good.
of all the amazing testimonials that we get from our clients.
Well, thank you so much for doing this today, Chris. I mean, definitely very interesting. And truthfully, I even love the entrepreneurial journey of going from like one area of expertise to another and kind of adapting. And that's really, the flexibility is super cool that you were able to see an opportunity and be like, hey, we're going to now, make this for human consumption. So just that story alone is inspiring. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And thank you for being on my podcast today.
That story and actually other things, kind of like our initial business plan, was very specific, and nothing in the initial business plan happened. Like literally nothing in the initial business plan happened. So I talk about that in the book. I've put together, well, I can put together a unique URL for your audience if you are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to learn more, so definitely we'll put it below, and we can put that link below if you want to go check it out and you want to buy. It's called My Vital C. And Chris, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, on social media, you can find me at My Vital C, C as in carbon. And my YouTube channel is growing. I'm pretty excited about that. I'd love to increase my Instagram channel. I'm putting out good content daily on a regular basis. And we'll get that URL. I'll also get a $15 off coupon, and that'll be on that URL that's
Amazing.
in the
Thank
show
you.
notes. We'll
Awesome.
do that. And then I do want to share one aspect of the book. So the book is available on Amazon for 20 bucks. You can get it on the website for 20 bucks also. But if you want a signed copy, we charge an extra $10 for that signed copy. That full $10 goes to Operation Underground Railroad. I don't know if you remember the movie The Sound of Freedom,
I
which is,
heard of it. I just didn't see it.
yeah, it's about, well, it's a tearjerker, that's for sure. It's
Yeah, I
about
know.
child sex. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
rough.
know.
I actually went back and was like, I should watch this again. And then I started it. It was like, no, I'm not going to watch this again. Like,
Yeah.
once is enough. But basically, it's about helping and stopping child sex trafficking. And so, 100% of the signature fee goes to Operation Underground Railroad.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, Andrea.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Chris. If you did, please share it, because the more you share shows you care. And please take a moment to rate and review our podcast, because that tells the algorithm that you're enjoying what you're hearing. Thank you for spending the last little bit with me. I know there's a lot you can be doing, but instead you chose to spend your time with me. And for that, I am grateful. I'll see you at the next interview.